Welcome back, YouTube. This is COZUNON, back again with Brother Billy.
Brother Billy, right here. That's me.
That's him. And today, I kind of wanted to go against the grain, against what it seems like everybody else on YouTube is doing, and taking pot shots at Capcom, you know, for their recent antics, I guess you would say. And I know
shady business practices.
Exactly. Remember that? Deja vu. I personally wanted to look back at, you know, a much better time in Capcom's history, go against the grain, not be negative about this kind of thing, and I just want to talk about my love for Street Fighter.
Fuck negativity.
Street Fighter is the shit. My favorite fighting game of all time. It's just so awesome. And I remember the first time I kind of said this about in Compa Catch's response video, but the very first time I remember Street Fighter was actually Street Fighter 2. I was standing out at my uncle's. I was younger at the time, and I had like $10. I think it was like $8. My uncle's like, well, let's go rent a video game with it. And I'm like, cool. We went in there, and it was just like some little rinky-dink mom and pop shop, and I was like, well, I don't know what to get, because you know we were used to getting cheap games at pawn shops. And I asked the guy, I'm like, what's a really good game? And he said, you know, Street Fighter 2 seems to be really big right now. A lot of people like it. And I'm like, cool, let me try that game out. For that weekend, because he actually lived in another town, so we were there for the whole weekend, I was glued to the TV and the Super Nintendo, and I was hooked ever since. The actual first game I bought for the series was on the Super Nintendo. It wasn't Street Fighter 2, unfortunately. This is years later when I got my own job. It was actually Super Street Fighter 2. This isn't the original one I own. This is obviously for the Sega Genesis. But when we were growing up, we didn't have a Sega Genesis.
Super Nintendo all the way.
Super Nintendo. I remember we were out with my mom and dad. We went to Toys R Us. And this is back when Toys R Us had the little cards. So you would flip the little card up to see, like, you know, read the description, see a couple of screenshots, and then you'd pull this little tag out and you take the tag up to the customer service area where they ring you out. They would ring it up, and then you take your receipt over to this little window, and they would give you the game there. We stopped at Toys R Us first, which is kind of odd. Begged my dad to take us to Toys R Us because he didn't want to take us there. And the next stop we had to go to was my grandma's, and I didn't get out to go into my grandma's house, which is kind of odd. I stayed inside my dad's van, and I stayed in the back, read the manual from cover to cover. So my very first game that I ever owned was Super Street Fighter 2, and I personally bought it. And that's probably why it holds like a spot like in my heart more than any other game, is because it is the first one that I purchased. And so for me, that was my pick, was obviously Super Street Fighter 2. I love them all. I love the original one. My two favorite were always the underdog favorites, because everyone seemed to love Cammy. Cammy was good, but I loved Fei Long and T-Hawk. For whatever reasons, those were always my favorites. What was the definitive video game of this series, in your opinion?
In my opinion, that would have to be Street Fighter Alpha 3. There were just so many characters in that game, so much content, so much you can do. The only thing that it didn't have was a tournament, which Super Street Fighter 2 had. Beyond that, you know, Street Fighter Alpha 3 was the game. It was just good. Out of the entire series, Alpha 3 is the best. What about you?
These are all games from my collection. This isn't all of my collection. Obviously, I have more games that I can't fit up here. The games that I did want to put up here, though, there's a couple anthologies I'm missing. I do have the Alpha anthology. I do have this great, awesome. It actually comes with all the games. Gym Fighter. I also have the EX3, which I wasn't a big fan of, and it's the Street Fighter game that out of all my collection I played the least. And there's a couple other ones. I got the Street Fighter Anniversary Edition, which is awesome in itself because it comes with Street Fighter 2 Turbo, it comes with Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, but it actually comes with Street Fighter 2 the animated movie on there. And when I first bought the game, I didn't own the movie, and I loved that fucking cartoon to death. I'm not a big anime fan by any means, but I did love...
I am.
He is.
I am.
But I did love that movie. And I recently went back, and I do own it now. It's just so fucking epic. This is Street Fighter 4, the Collector's Edition. I do want to bring this one up since we're talking about the anime. I bought the original one like a couple days after it was released, and then I was reading somewhere where Street Fighter 4 the animated movie was supposed to come out, and I kept looking for it on eBay, I kept looking up for it on Amazon, you know, on all the other bigger websites, and I couldn't find it. I remember looking it up, and it was saying it was only released in the special edition. So I had to go back through Amazon and buy the special edition, so I own this game twice. If I would have known this was a special edition right off the bat, I would have just bought that one and been done with it. But I got it for a really great deal. The box is kind of tore up, kind of, you know, crush in some areas, but I kind of straightened it out as best as I could. Everything else is in there: the game, the movie, the soundtrack, the little help guide, which is not much of a guide at all, and the actual Crimson Viper little figurette standee.
So tell me, how is that movie?
The movie's horrible.
Very.
Very horrible. I went back and the reason I heard about this movie is I went back and I bought Street Fighter the movie. Street Fighter the movie with Jean-Claude Van Damme. This is the actual video game for the Sega Saturn.
This was better.
A lot better than the movie.
Than the movie.
Than the animated movie. The movie with Jean-Claude Van Damme, at the time I hated it. Absolutely, positively fucking hated it. Now it's just so bad. It's epically awesome for me. I love the movie. The way I found it out is I rebought Street Fighter the movie on DVD, and it actually had a preview for Street Fighter 4, the animated version, on there. And I watched the segment on it, and I was like, this looks awesome.
Yeah, it looked awesome.
Like, this trailer made this movie look so awesome, and I wanted to own it. And like I said, I went through all the resources trying to find it, but I couldn't find it. That's why I had to own the special edition. I had to own this to get that movie.
Disappointed.
And I was disappointed in the movie itself. It's still cool that I have the collector's edition. It does come with the soundtrack. The soundtrack's really good still. I do love the music on Street Fighter. The Crimson Viper standee, I wish they would have done other standees in place of her, like her as well as other ones, because, you know, to me it kind of feels like they're trying to shove Crimson Viper down our throats, kind of like they did with Alex. But, you know, it is what it is. It's pretty cool. I think they chose her because she had big breasts. That's it. So I probably would have got the same standee anyway, but that's besides the point.
They could have chosen Chun-Li.
Chun-Li would have been hot. But, you know, like he said, Street Fighter Alpha 3, which I have right here, was a really great game too. I have the, along with the Sega Saturn on the movie, I also have Street Fighter Alpha 2 and Street Fighter Alpha. And I got these for the Saturn because everywhere I read reviews, they said the ports for the Saturn are actually more like the arcade than the PlayStation one. And if they made Street Fighter Alpha 3 for the Saturn, I would have bought it for the Saturn too.
So tell me, who were some of your favorite characters in this series?
Some of my favorite characters? All of them. Not even lying. I wish I could say like these guys. If I had to pick like a couple of them, like I couldn't. I really couldn't. Like, I love Ken. I like using Ken. I really like Chun-Li. And then when Super Street Fighter 2 came out, I was T-Hawk a lot. I was Fei Long a lot. Cammy was really easy to use. DJ you could pick up and use no matter what. And Dalsum has like this unbelievable reach that just makes him so epically awesome. E Honda is like next to impossible to hurt. And then he has like the flying headbutt and that little the flying up in the air butt bump.
And the hand slaps.
And the hand slaps. I mean, just everybody is just so awesome. And even Guile, you know, he has the 2 seconds, but the Sonic Kick and the Sonic Boom is just so fucking legit. You can't argue with that. Blanca was actually pretty easy to use too. I think out of all of them, he might have been my least favorite. But I mean, that's not saying much. I mean, because everybody else is so awesome. And I love using Blanca too. And Zangief, he was kind of harder to use because at the time, back then, they didn't have the control sticks. It was just the D-pad. And doing the 360 with a D-pad, you had to get really good at it. But the moment you were good at it, Zangief was like next to impossible because he can put you in all those little fucking twirling, you know, pile drivers, and he would just murder you.
If you were fighting a player that was good at that was painful.
Yeah. But then same thing with Street Fighter Alpha. All the characters in here were awesome too.
Yeah, very true.
All of them. And you like Dan. But Dan was like originally intended to be a joke character.
Dan was awesome. Dan
was like a combination of Robert Garcia and Ryo from The Art of Fighting, which a lot of people don't know. But it's The Art of Fighting. Ryo was kind of like a ripoff of Ken and Ryu. Obviously Ryu the name, and he looked just like Ken, only with like a black shirt underneath. And so Street Fighter came back, and they did a promotional picture for Street Fighter Alpha actually, and where Sagat had beaten this dude down that had Ryo's, you know, gi from Art of Fighting with Robert Garcia's head, and they ended up taking that character and making him a real character in Street Fighter Alpha. But he's like a joke character. His health wasn't that good. He had the one-handed Hadouken, but it didn't go very far.
It did go all the way across the screen, not like
But
you did.
he was still really easy to, even though he's a joke character and not made, as strong as all the other ones, he was still really easy to pick up and use. And that's what
He played a lot like Ryu and Ken.
That's what I love about this game is the links they go to make sure everybody is like easy to pick up and use. And talking about like the bosses, like I love being Bison. The least one I liked being probably out of all of them was Balrog. But I love being Vega. I love this little roll and how he does the double jumps off the wall. And Sagat was possibly my favorite. Tiger uppercut, tiger knee. I hated him when I fought him, but when I was Sagat, I loved it.
In the earlier games, such as Street Fighter 2, I liked Sagat a lot, playing as him. But in the later games, Street Fighter 4, I thought he was a horrible character. I couldn't play as him.
I still like him. I was really able to pick him up in Street Fighter 4. He was actually probably like, on Street Fighter 4, I went through and I beat him with everybody. And he was still like one of the easiest people I could beat him with Sagat. He plays a lot like Ken and Ryu.
I remember Sagat being better than what he was in Street Fighter 4.
So you're saying he was better back in Alpha in the original?
Yeah.
I honestly think he was the same. I don't think they dumbed him down or anything. I think when you fought him, he was kind of dumbed down. Because I remember in Street Fighter 2, he always shot the tigers at you, and if you jumped, he always did the tiger uppercut right away. Or if you kind of walked towards him, he would do another tiger or tiger knee. So like trying to get close to Sagat was really tough. And I think they did dumb that down a lot in the later ones. But to me, like to pick up and use, it was still real easy. But that's the reasons why I love Street Fighter. My favorite fighting game, hands down. I know there's some people out there that used to be Street Fighter, but because they hate Capcom now, they'll probably be like, King of Fighters is a lot better. I like Fatal Fury. Or Blaze Blue. Blaze Blue is actually a really good one.
Blaze Blue is really fun.
I'm at this point, I think a lot of people are going to start jumping on the Blaze Blue bandwagon just because of the recent reputation Capcom has given themselves, and it's unfortunate.
Blaze Blue deserves it though.
Blaze Blue is a really good game. It is a really good, well-polished game. I just wanted to come on here today, guys, express my love for Street Fighter. I love Street Fighter to death.
Me too. I love it.
I really think that Capcom's getting. I don't want to say they don't deserve it. I understand a lot. They did a lot of shady moves recently, but I still love the series, and I will continue to love it. So that's all we're going to talk about today. Thank you, YouTube, for watching.